Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Front of Mind Be It Positive Filters digital event hosted by the CMI South East Regional Board. My name is Mel, and I'm an Events Delivery Coordinator here at CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to Steve to begin this evening's event. If you have any questions during the session, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can. Today's session is being recorded, and it will be shared with you tomorrow for those who have booked, and will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. Now over to Stephen Duncan, Deputy Chair of CMI South East Regional Board.
Thank you very much, Mel, and welcome to everyone, particularly those who are returning for the second event. I'm delighted to be joined this evening by Dean Bellman, who is Operations Director for Mace Defence and Director of Value Behaviours, as we explore the topic of Front of Mind. So Front of Mind is a programme that brings positive psychology research to life in practical, usable strategies, helping you to take responsibility and control of your positive mental health. Prevention is always better than cure, so join the growing number of people investing in their positive mental health and learn how to own it, be it, and share it. So, thank you very much, Dean.
Hi again, Steve. Yeah, great to be back again. Thank you.
Thank you. So, just moving on from our last event, I seem to remember that you promised us a fun activity to start every session and to get everyone into this habit of actually doing things. So, what have you got for me tonight?
Okay, a fun activity. Well, I guess I'll leave that to the audience to judge whether it's fun, but certainly an activity. So humour me, if you will. What I'd like everyone to do, if they're happy to, is to quickly go and find their mobile phones, or maybe it's a tablet or something like that. But go and find a device that's got a photo album on it. So most people on their mobile phones have got some pictures, some photos. And what I'd like you to do is have a look at your photo album, as I'm doing now, and just find a picture that makes you smile. So have a look through your photos and find a picture that makes you smile. Okay. And now that you've got that picture that makes you smile, what I'd like you to do is send that picture as a message or as a WhatsApp to someone, and just with a note saying, this picture makes me smile. Show me something that makes you smile. Send me a picture that makes you smile. And it's just, you don't even need to do this with a picture if you don't want to. You can just send a positive message to someone, just a nice message. You can do it as a picture. You can just do it as a message, a positive message to someone. But what we often start workshops, sessions, meetings with as well, we've started quite high-level C-spine board meetings with getting people to take their phones out, and just when they think we're going to ask them to switch their phones to stun or silent, we say, no, what we'd like you to do is send a nice message to someone, but someone who's probably not expecting to hear from you, and see what we achieve from that. So maybe if people could do that and maybe give us a thumbs up on the chat. I think people can access a chat bar, can't they, on this if they're on the session live? Yeah. Give us a thumbs up. And who knows, if you get a reply back and it's safe to share, you could maybe even share what reply you get from your happy picture or your nice message to someone.
And if I could just take that one stage further, let us know how you felt when you did it. You know, so just the act of finding your photo and sending the message, did that do anything? Yeah,
absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll maybe revisit this later in the session and just look at the effects and what's happened.
Yeah, no pressure, Dino. Okay then. So in our last session, we talked quite a lot about actually owning the responsibility for our own mental health, and accepting that, you know, we have to do something about it. So my question to you then is, if we accept that we have a responsibility, what is it we can actually do?
So as you say, you see behind the the sessions that we've structured, 5 sessions, are around the fundamental principles of front of mind, which are own it, be it, and share it. And as you said, we covered own it on the last session a few weeks ago, and that's still available for people that want to view it on YouTube if they want to. Once you've taken ownership, you fundamentally believe that you are responsible for your mental health. Other people will have an influence on it, an impact on it, organizations will, but the buck stops with you. You have the fundamental responsibility. So now what we should intelligently do is seek ways to strive to be positively mentally healthy. So be it actually breaks down into 3 elements. And then in week 5, we'll come on to share it as the final part of the series. And what we're going to cover today in the second session of the 5-part series is the first part of be it, which is a proactive strategy. And it's called positive filters. On the next session, session 3, we'll cover the second part of be it, which are force multipliers. And then on session 4, we'll cover the third part of be it, which is spin recovery. And that's a reactive way to be it. Okay. But today, what can we do? So this session is all about something we term positive filters. Now, goodness knows, if we were to let our brains be filled by what the media and the news broadcasts all the time, we'd get quite a one-sided view of negative to positive in the world generally. Okay, we often see quite an overwhelming amount of negative broadcasting in the news and the media. So what we want to do is train our brain to put a filter in there. Filter through the positive into the brain and start filtering out some of that negative. There's a whole host of things we can do, but the clue is in that title that I said, it's train the brain. How can we, through repeated activity, begin to train our brain? We know through the science of neuroplasticity that our growth mindset is absolutely a scientific capability. We can train our brains. We can grow activity in certain areas of our brains or in any area of our brain. So we're going to look at ways that we can train our brain to filter out some of the negative and filter through some of the positive. And today's session is about talking through some of those strategies and actually giving some of them a go right now.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying about training the brain, and just bear with me, because, you know, if I was to talk about training the body, I'm sure myself and everyone else listening could imagine what was involved with that. So what do you actually mean by training your brain?
Okay. Well, you mentioned training the body, and the way we can train the body in a variety of ways. We could go to the gym. We could train our muscle groups. We could train our aerobic system through aerobic activity. But whichever one of those it is, it's the repeated pattern of these activities. Okay, we can't just go and do it once and expect to get the benefits. We'll get a short-term small benefit, but it's the repeated activity. So much so that it becomes a routine. We make it a routine, and eventually some of these activities, for many people, you know, going running a few times a week or some of the things they do for their bodies becomes a habit. It's something that they feel they have to do, and it provides a benefit. So you need to think in exactly the same way, but for the brain. What activities can we do with our brain that over a repeated period of time, you're repeating over a period of time, will derive a benefit the same as improving our aerobic capacity or improving our muscle strength? What can we do to improve our brain? And of course, what we're actually doing is we're rewiring the brain. By repeating certain patterns of thinking, certain patterns of neural activity, firing certain synaptic pathways in a similar fashion again and again, those patterns become paths of least resistance in our brain, and we get really good at them. And we've all done this. You know, I imagine everyone on this call either knows a child or has been a child themselves at some point in time, yourself included, Steve. And you've done this. You've learned times tables. You've revised for exams. Many of you, if not all of you, will still be doing it in some capacity now in your work and in your personal lives. You'll be repeating certain patterns so that they form a structure in your brain. And that's the same, but we're going to do it with positive habits, positive techniques. Okay.
Yeah, so now that I've got over the minor panic that ensued at the mention of the six timers table, I hear and I think I've got a slightly clearer idea. But you know, for the skeptics out there, what's the science that's behind this? How do we know? How can you convince me that this works?
Okay. Well, before we get into some of the strategies, and actually talking through some of the strategies proves some of the actual benefit behind this, but let's look at the academic case first of all. About 15 years ago, and there are many such studies around this, but about 15 years ago, there was a study at Harvard University in America. Now, the study, you can research it yourself, look it up on a search engine, has become known as the Tetris effect study. It wasn't called the Tetris effect study when it was originally brought about. And the study was about how the brain made decisions when fatigued. So like all good studies, there was an active sample and a control sample. And the control sample were given a 30-minute decision-making test to complete on 3 consecutive days, a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday. And they completed this decision-making test. And it was quite dynamic and quite difficult. The active sample arrived 6 hours before the test. And each member of the active sample played 6 hours of the game Tetris. Do you remember the computer game Tetris? You get it on a Nintendo or a Game Boy. Different shapes fall from the top of the screen, and you could rotate them and shift them left and right. But the idea was to complete a row at the bottom. It would flash, disappear, and the game continues. Well, these poor people in the active sample played 6 hours before the decision-making test, and they did this on 3 days. They played 18 hours of Tetris. And then they did the same decision-making test as the control sample. Now, I have no idea what the results of the tests were. It doesn't even mention what the results of the test were if you look up Tetris effect now, because the interesting thing that happened over the weekend and became evident on the Monday morning. So on the Monday morning, after the weekend that followed the 3 days of the tests and 18 hours of Tetris, many, if not all, of the members of the active sample, that is to say those that had played 18 hours of Tetris, came into the laboratory, found the researchers and said, "You guys won't believe what's been happening over the weekend." And the researcher said, what's been happening? And individually, they brought about a similar story to this. Well, everywhere I've been, I've seen the world as a version of Tetris. Okay, what do you mean? Well, I went shopping at the supermarket on Saturday morning, and as I was buying some cereal, I walked down the cereal aisle and I thought, wow, if you flip the Rice Krispies on its side, it'll fit between the cornflakes and the Cocoa Pops. And then I went down the bread aisle and I thought, oh, if you flip that tiger loaf on its side, it'll fit between the sliced white and the sourdough bread. And then they looked at some windows on a wall and they thought, well, if you put those 3 windows closer together, they'll fit between the 2 doors on the bottom. And everywhere they looked, they saw patterns of moving shapes. What this research had inadvertently stumbled on was something called pattern programming. And that is, if we repeatedly look for certain patterns, in this case it was shapes, but it could be patterns in any form, then our brain starts noticing those patterns elsewhere. Okay, if you decide, Steve, that you want to buy a white Toyota, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. You research that vehicle and you think, I'm going to get it. What you will start seeing is that model of white Toyota around and about all over the place because your brain has honed in on it, so you'll start seeing it. And this is called pattern programming. And that's the science that says, if we repeatedly look and search, and it's this act of searching, the brain, the neural activity, searching for these patterns, then our brains get really good at finding them. And it's known as something that, Steve, you first introduced me to many, many years ago, Hebbian theory. Neurons that fire together, wire together. A complex, deep, and beautiful theory of neuroscience summarized by a simple paragraph. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Fantastic. I enjoyed hearing that there, Dean. So great. You know, we've seen it. I can kind of see how this might start to be relevant. You know, if I'm looking at it, can you give me a real example?
Absolutely. We're going to be doing one in a minute as well. But here's my favorite example of this. We're really fortunate. We work with a lot of schools. And I love working with schools for two reasons. One, you get to put positive mental health strategies and techniques into the system as upstream as possible, which is great because we're teaching kids, so the kids can use it themselves. They can go home and teach their parents. And two, because the most honest debrief you'll ever get is from children. So if you ever want to evolve your training or your course or whatever it is you're doing, go and deliver it to children, because you will get the most effective and honest debriefs, and you can really push your course and your training and your material forward very quickly. Anyway, every school we ever work with, we go to meet the teachers, the head teacher, the head of PSHE, whatever it is, and we tell them what this course is and how it's going to work. And then we say, well, look, why don't you think about it and then get back in touch? In the meantime, we're going to give you a strategy for free. And the strategy is called Tetris at the School Gates. And they say, okay, what's that? And I tell them the story of where Tetris effect comes from, the story I've just told you about the Harvard research. And I say, so do you go out and welcome your kids in at the school gate in the morning? Now, all schools do this. Some of the staff will go out and they'll welcome the kids in. And again, some of the staff will go out at the end of the day and say good night to the kids, see you in the morning, have a good evening, see you on Monday if it's a Friday. So we know schools do this. So they say, yes, we do that. And they're very proud of doing that. And it's a great thing. And we say, right, well, build Tetris into it. As you're welcoming children in, about every 10th or 12th, maybe 15th child at random, stop them and say, morning, Jane. Tell me something good that's going to happen in school today. And don't let them go past until they tell you something good. Now, to start with, you'll get a lot of eyes up and right and scratching of heads. But don't let them go past till they tell you something good. And it might just be that, sponge pudding's on the dessert menu today and I like sponge pudding. Great. Or we've got PE today and it's basketball and I like basketball. Great. Enjoy your basketball, Jane. Okay. And then on the way out, again, stop every 20th, 15th child at random and say, Philip, tell me something positive that happened in school today. So now they're not looking into the future. Now they're in memory recall and they're looking for something positive that happened. And don't let them leave until they tell you. Now they're going to think of something pretty quickly because they don't want to stand there talking to the teachers. They want to get home and get to the Xbox or get to ballet practice or rugby practice, whatever it is. And the teachers say to me, okay, so what? After about a week, we'll have spoken to about 50 kids and it's all at random anyway. I say, yeah, absolutely. What about after 2 weeks? And they say, I don't know, maybe 90, 100 kids. I say, okay, what about after a month? And they say, I don't know. It's like a maths test, maybe 150 children. And I say, yes. But I tell you what will happen. By the end of week 1, every child in your school will know that there's a group of teachers out the front stopping kids at random, asking them for positive things that are going to happen. And on the way out, positive things that have happened. That will spread like wildfire around your school, that knowledge. So what will happen very quickly is children will walk around the corner into school. They'll see the line of teachers lined up there, and every child will think of something positive that's going to happen in case they get stopped, because they don't want to stand and talk to you. They want to get in and talk to their mates, their friends. So every child will think of something. They'll preempt it and they'll think of something, and 14 out of 15 won't get stopped. And the ones that do will be able to just say something really quickly. And the same will happen on the way out. Every child will see that line of teachers and they'll think, oh, quick, think of something good that happened in school. Now, only 1 in 15, 1 in 20 is actually vocalizing these good things. But every child is doing the thinking. And it's the neural activity that completes the pattern programming. What will happen 2-3 months down the line is that you'll have a school where every child walks in thinking of something positive that's going to happen, and every child that leaves school thinking of something positive that has happened. Would you like to be the head teacher of that school? And we've never had a school not take us up on this, and we've never had a school come back and say that it didn't work. So it's and that is it. We're just using positive pattern programming, and we're doing it in a really efficient way because we're doing it with only 5-7% effort.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that in the initial stages you get a double hit because those children who aren't picked are got something else to be grateful for.
Well, that as well, absolutely.
Yeah. Really like that, and can see that, and can kind of see that in my own work. But this is the Chartered Management Institute. So have you got a kind of non-educational example, a business example for us?
So absolutely, I said, that if we go back to this idea of sharing something positive, sharing a positive message, and we'll touch on that again just briefly in a second. But we know that by taking just a few minutes, we know from the study of positive outliers from the field of positive psychology that positively engaged brains are more collaborative, communicative, and creative. Okay. So what do we mean by that? We mean brains that have had a release of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin, GABA, these performance functional chemicals, hormones in the body. So what we know is that it's worth, even if it's only a half-hour meeting that you're having at work, maybe a Monday morning scrum, maybe a half-hour review meeting, it's worth giving up 5%, maybe even 10% of every meeting you ever have to supercharge everyone's brain. Now, if the activity you're doing to supercharge people's brains is also an activity that engages everyone in thinking of something positive, you're getting a double win effect. You are supercharging everyone's brain with a release of a positive functioning hormone or a cocktail of positive functioning hormones. So that meeting is going to be more collaborative and more creative and more communicative. But also over time, you are getting that group of people to do this positive pattern programming. So for example, you could say, okay, Monday morning scrum meeting is going to start with the first 4 minutes. 2 people are going to be chosen. One of you will tell us something positive that happened in the workplace last week, and one of you will tell us something positive that's going to happen in the workplace in the coming week or 2. Okay, and it could be something positive for you personally, something positive for your team, something positive for the company, something positive for the community. Doesn't matter, that we're not going to prescribe what it has to be. So everyone now has to turn up to the meeting with a retrospective and a forward-looking positive thought. But only 2 people get asked. So you create a level playing field for the meeting because the 2 people who get asked could be completely different grades. You supercharge everyone's brain with positive emotions because everyone's sat there thinking of the positive thing in case they get asked. So right, everyone think of your positive things. Okay, do today a true military style, pose the question. Okay, everyone think of their positive things, pause. Steve, what's your positive thing for last week? Now, everyone has just thought of their positive thing for last week, but only Steve gets to vocalize it. So everyone releases the associated chemicals. And over time, we start positive pattern programming that group's brain. So very simple way, start meetings with a positive activity like that.
And that would tie in with a question that we've already had. I know we are going to move on to some practical strategy, but from Joe S, just to do with pattern searching, and it was, how do you stop looking for the negative patterns?
Overwhelm it. Neurons that fire together wire together. Recognize when you are. Congratulate yourself for recognizing that you are, because that's one step closer to shifting towards looking for positive patterns. So there's a big misnomer when people think, oh, I don't want to think about these negative patterns. They think about it and they beat themselves up. No, you've just recognized that you're doing it. Okay, so that's a positive step. And in recognizing it, now trump it, now reverse it. Say, okay, right, I'm now not going to move away from this thought bubble until I think of something positive around that. And it's not making something up for the sake of it. It's using really, really clear principles that we call reframing. So look at the same situation, but through a different frame of reference, and find something that you can learn. Even if the only thing about this negative thing that you're viewing is that you've learned from it, that you can grow from the experience, you've taken a positive from it.
Yeah.
But Joe, it's just repetition, I'm afraid.
Excellent. And going back to what you said there about vocalizing, there's a lot of research within deterrence theory that shows that vocalizing is a key part to showing intent. both to the people you're dealing with, but to yourself as well. Okay, then just moving on, Dean, I can see the benefits of doing this. I can see, great, I can have business meetings in which I've got a more energized, more innovative and inventive group. But what about the rest? Is there any kind of wider benefit to this outside of that?
Yes, there are huge benefits, and the scale and scope of them, it can be exponential. So let me give you another example, and it's something that I would like everyone to do now. And it's something called a dynamic grateful. So prior to having dinner with my children, we put the food on the table, and then we go round the table, and we each vocalize something we're grateful for that day and why. So we have to put ourselves back in the moment of being grateful for that thing, that person, whatever it was, and then explain why we were grateful for it. So it's dynamic, it's reliving the moment and then vocalizing it for others. Why is that so powerful? Well, we know from back in Eastern philosophy that living a grateful life is a hugely empowering thing. Not only does it mean that over time of recognizing and recalling and sharing things that we're grateful for, will we start to want that latest gadget less and less because we're satisfied with what we've got. By identifying things we're grateful for and choosing to recognize to be grateful for them, we start to need those other things less because we feel gratitude with what we've got. The other brilliant thing, and this is where this wider scope of benefit comes in, Steve, is the same part of the brain that scans for and identifies things that we're grateful for, that is to say, good, nice things that have happened, is the same part of the brain that identifies good things that could happen. And that's called identifying opportunity. So we know that people who live a grateful life, who on a regular basis build into their life routine this action, this activity of taking some time in the day, maybe just 3 minutes, to write down 3 things they're grateful for and why, but every day, and different things every day, get positive pattern programming really good at identifying things they're grateful for, because their brain, those synaptic pathways have become paths of least resistance. My youngest, Joe, and my eldest, but particularly my youngest, they can scan for things they're grateful for at an incredible rate now. We've been doing gratefuls at the dinner table for over 4 years. I promise you, they could give you a never-ending list of gratefuls. They can think of things faster than they can vocalize them. And if you've trained that part of the brain, you've trained the part of the brain that identifies opportunity. So your peripheral vision for opportunity, good things that could happen, is going to be so much wider than others. You are going to notice opportunities that other people miss because your brain is actively scanning for them because you've trained it.
Excellent. And from a business point of view, that's really got to be worth having.
Sure.
Yeah, I know Professor Wiseman in his book 59 Seconds, out of it, all the advice that he gives for improving your life, the number one at the end of the book is developing this gratitude attitude. So I've just got a question coming here from Karen Booth. She asked, going back to the schools you work with, were any able to measure an increase in positivity or happiness following the exercise?
Karen, yes, both objectively and subjectively. So let me give you an example of both. Objectively, what they noticed was that the children were arriving in form registration in the morning in a much better state of mind. So because of this, the form teachers started saying that 10-15 minute registration was a much better experience than it used to be. Because of this, what a lot of schools started doing is many teachers took it on themselves to start their classes with a similar type thing. So, asking everyone to think of something positive, maybe around their subject area or something like that, but only asking 1 or 2 in the class. What did that do? It meant that the first 2 minutes of every lesson, brought the class's attention into one thing that they were all familiar with, a pattern of thinking that they knew how to do, and that maybe only one or two would contribute, but again, all the class were doing the thinking. So it calms the class down, brings them all to a way of thinking, releases some of those, super fuel chemicals, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphin, serotonin, GABA, and then you're off on the rest of your 38 minutes of the lesson. The subjective one was the best piece of feedback I had from a head teacher, who called me about 6 months later and said, Dean, I love this. Said it's permeated throughout the school, and trust a head teacher to find a way of monetizing it. The head teacher said, this is brilliant. It's even making a difference to our recruitment, our numbers in the school. Every school wants to fill their quota, right? They get paid per child in the school. He said, every time we have a parent, parents and a child come to view the school, and I show them around the school, at some point I will say to the parents, choose any child in any class. Just choose a child at random. And the parent can go, or the prospective parent will go, okay, that child over there, the one at the back picking their nose. And go, okay, Johnny, come up here. Tell these people something positive about school today, either something good that has happened or is going to happen. And Johnny gives something like that because he's already thought of it. He may have already thought of both, depending on the time of the day. Okay. And the head teacher says, right, choose another child. So, it's this, if I was being shown around a school and I was considering my child going to that school, and the teacher challenged me to choose any kid in the school, and that kid was called over and the teacher said, right, tell this person something positive about school, and they came back like that, I'd be pretty impressed.
I can only agree with you, and this point that if we can get ourselves into that positive mindset, as you say, get those chemicals flowing, feeling positive within ourselves, then whatever we're going to do next, we approach in a positive manner. Absolutely. No matter whether it's difficult or something that perhaps isn't our favourite on the list normally.
Yeah. People are generally most productive in tasks that they were putting to the back of the to-do list after they've done a physical activity session. Why is that? It doesn't make sense. They should be tired. They should not want to do that bit of cleaning that they've been putting off to do that thing. But they do it because the physical activity has actually released all these dopamine endorphins. And now they are supercharged and thinking, right, I'll get it done. I feel good. I'll get it done. It's exactly to your point.
Excellent. So before we look at any further questions, do you want to give us what are, just go through again what today's takeaway exercise is?
So we started with sharing a positive story, a positive message or a positive picture. Why would we do that? Well, you picked up on part of it. How does it make you feel? So if you do this, and an interesting question would be, if I just said at the start of this, do you know what, sending a nice message or a nice picture to someone who's maybe not expecting to hear from you is a really nice thing, you should do it. And I hadn't said, well, let's all do it now. How many people would have done it? And, probably not that many, certainly, maybe 50% of people wouldn't have done it. So the first lesson is make the time and take the time. So if we want to become it, there's no good just knowing that these things work. We've got to do them. And that involves building a structure around it. So make the time and then take that time. Okay. One thing, making the time, we can all put a little window in our diary, but then that often gets pushed to the side because something else comes. No, take that time. Because in this case, this positive message, what will it achieve for you? Well, hopefully you'll feel good. You'll feel good because you're doing good, something nice for someone else. But the way you've done that is you've had to actually think, who shall I send a message to? What difference will it make to them? So you've done a level of thinking which makes you feel good about it. What will it achieve for them? Well, hopefully, as a minimum, it might raise a smile. Some of you might have had a message back saying, are you okay? But, but hopefully it'll raise a smile. But what might it do? What might it do if that person that wasn't expecting to hear from you hasn't heard from anyone for a few days? And actually, they've had an alignment of planets that have really got them into a negative thinking space. But your message arrives. Your message saying, I was thinking of you and just wanted to show you this picture that made me smile. And it might just be the difference. So as a minimum, maybe you give someone a smile and get a response and engage in a conversation. But who knows what you might achieve? You might save someone's life. So it's worth doing. And imagine what it would be if this time next month, imagine what it'd be if on the 12th of June, you could turn around and say that you've sent 31 messages in 31 days to people that weren't expecting to hear from you. Where would your mindset be then? And how would your support network be? The conversations you'll have had with people that you maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's the takeaway I'd like you to take from today. You've got to make time and take time, but you've got to repeat it as well. I've talked a little bit about the gym and about physical activity. You can't go and stand outside a gym, the glass window of a gym, and look inside and your muscles get bigger. You've got to go in and start lifting the weights, or get on the treadmill, or get on the spin class. You can't get fitter or stronger by standing outside the gym looking in. And you can't gain the benefits of positive mental health by knowing that these techniques exist. You've got to do them. So there you go. That would be my takeaway today. Make the time and take the time.
Excellent. I mean, it reminds me a bit of Adair's comment for action-centered leadership. By doing, one becomes.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of sums it up. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in.
Okay.
One of which must be have been planted by yourself. Where would you recommend? This is from Emma Collar. Where would you recommend studying more about positive psychology?
Oh, Emma, fantastic question. So positive psychology courses exist now in colleges, universities. You can do degrees in positive psychology, masters, doctorates. I think a really great place to get a foundation in understanding the application of positive psychology from some of the leading lights in positive psychology are on TED Talks. So that if you go on to TED, Technology, Entertainment, Design, a fantastic site where field leaders, thought leaders get to give examples of their experience, their knowledge, their insights. And if you just put positive psychology into TED, some fantastic talks by Sean Aker, by Amy Cuddy, absolute hero of mine, Barbara Fredrickson. Barbara Fredrickson is a genius. In fact, she hasn't got a TED talk, but if you just Google or whatever search engine you use, put Barbara Fredrickson in there, broaden and build theory. Broaden and build theory is exactly this theory of, by releasing chemicals, we communicate, collaborate, and create better. And that has enabled us to develop as a species. So Barbara Fredrickson, she is a living genius, absolute genius. Have a look at her work. And that will naturally lead you into other areas. But TED Talks and some of those leading lights would be a good place to start.
Thank you for that. And Sean Aker's talks are certainly very entertaining.
Very fast and funny, yes.
Yeah. There's two questions here that are kind of the same. So if it's okay with you, I'll ask them both, because I think so. The first one is, I can see how I can use some of these techniques myself, but how can I help individuals in my team or colleagues without it seeming a bit odd, weird, or intrusive?
Yeah.
And then that's from Joe S. And then from X-Ray Uniform, we have, how can the school gratitude system be introduced to my office team?
Okay, so introduction of things into a workplace, but also just that contextual element of sometimes it might seem a bit out of place. So the thing to do here is take a bit of time to think, what do I want to do as a group activity? And then what do I want to do as, supporting individuals? Because anything you do to support an individual well, everything is relationship based, but in supporting an individual, we're looking at, really understanding, that what's required for them. So that's communication, that's dialogue. And in that, use your ears more than your mouth. Listen, and then come up with, okay, well, something that works for me is this, and you can give them some ideas, and maybe even commit to doing something with them, sharing something you're grateful for every day between each other, or sharing a positive message, and commit to doing that with them. If you're going to do it on a group, or if you want to introduce something like the school gratitudes to a team, then there's various different mechanisms that you can use to do it. You could either do it as sharing a gratitude, vocally. Or you could do it as a gratitude box where people can write it down and post it in. You can do all sorts of different things in that sense. But what I would say is just take the time to work out, do you want to do this as a group, or do you want to do this as an individual support mechanism, and then tailor the way you do it appropriately. The other thing I would say is, if you're going to introduce something as a group and you're a bit worried that it might not land well, plant some advocates and champions. Okay, the rule of 3 applies everywhere in life. Once 3 people say, yes, we're going to do something, that's it. Inertia has been overcome and momentum has been achieved, and you are off to the races. Okay, so if I wanted to start to introduce this idea that every meeting from now on will start with someone chosen at random to share something positive, I would say in the meeting, I would plant 3 people. I would get 3 people I know I can trust, and I can say, look, I'm going to say this idea. Jane, I want you to immediately say, oh, I've seen that before. It really worked well. David, I want you to say, yeah, I've seen that as well. And I want Tim, I want you to say, that sounds really good. I'd love to give it a go. Let's do it. And if those 3 people speak before anyone else speaks, that's it. Motion carried. So, gratuitously plant some support, and then put forward your idea.
Brilliant. And this, you've kind of already covered it, but just in case you have anything else to add, from Morag Hutchinson, she said she's got a mood hoover in her team, and she's trying to figure out how to deal with their attitude so that they won't distract from others who are engaging in the positivity exercises.
So there's a combination, Morag, of group activity to make them realize that they're the outlier and this is the way the group's moving. And if they want to stay part of the group, they need to start to learn how that group's working. And the other thing is to remember, every time someone isn't conforming, we've got to consider what's not visible on their iceberg. Okay, so it's always worth the investment in the relationship to say, okay, how would you get that person involved, him or her? How would you help the team to move towards this? Help them to become part of the solution and maybe the implementation, if possible.
Fantastic. So, just to answer, Liz Flynn asked, Sean who?
Sean Aker, SHAWN Sean Aker. His TED Talk is called The Happy Secret to Better Work. And it's brilliant.
It is. And just before we close, we've had various comments from the beginning about photos, including the question, has anyone sent a photo that isn't a dog? But there's a few, and people have had replies sent back. So that was very early on.
Well, I'd just like to say that would have been my photo, my 2 boys with our new puppy. There you go.
Oh, bless. So, once again, Dean, thank you very much. Time has flown by. If you could just give us in a minute what we're going to be covering in the next session.
So next session, session 3, is the second part of Be It, and we're going to be talking about force multipliers. So today was about how we can train the brain through patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior. Next week, or in a few weeks' time, force multipliers. How can we feed the brain? What can we put into our brains, into our bodies that ends up in our brain? And remember, that could be oxygen, that could be nutrition, that could be education, that could be the beauty of nature. how can we feed the brain, and what does regular feeding the brain through routine and habit achieve?
Fantastic. So I'd just like to say, if Dean's sister is joining us from North Carolina, thank you very much, and you have my commiseration. And on behalf of the Southeast Regional Board, we'd like to thank you all for joining us, and hope that we will see you at the next session. So Mel, it's back to you. Thank you.
Great. That is it for this evening's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you, Steve, for hosting, and Dean for your insights and expertise. The next event, as Dean mentioned, is the Force Multipliers, which is on the 2nd of June. The link will be shared in the follow-up email tomorrow, as well as the other upcoming Front of Mind series event links. If you're a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, where you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. If you're not yet a member, why not join our community via the link as well in the live chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening.